My name is Dr. Catherine Matthews, and it is my great honor to be the principal of Everett High School. At this time, I would ask that you stand for the presentation of our nation's colors by our Naval Junior ROTC cadets, and the Pledge of Allegiance led by ASB President and member of the class of 2010, Jorge Miguel Posadas Uceda.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It is such an honor to see all of you here today. Thanks to the wonders of technology and the generosity of Dr. Sanford Wright Jr., our day is being recorded here so that alumni across the country and the world can be with us, if not literally, at least in spirit. We are here today to celebrate the centennial of our beloved historical main building. It is a beautiful symbol of what is an even more important concept, the deep roots of our families and friends who have attended Everett High School for generations. Those deep roots were very apparent to me from my first days here as parents and family members of our incoming ninth grade students identified themselves by their graduating classes. Though we are a very different school and community 100 years later, our proud tradition of excellence in the arts, politics, sciences, athletics, literature, and military continue to inspire our students today. I will defer the details of that proud history to a more able historian, our own Larry O'Donnell, class of 1955. But before he begins, some recognitions are in order. I would ask that you stand so that we may recognize you. First, joining us is a relatively new member of our school community, our new Everett Public Schools Superintendent, Dr. Gary Cohn. And Noah, if you could bring the lights up in the house, please. Thank you. Dr. Cohn? We also have some members of our board of directors who are here with us today. If you would stand and be recognized. And any elected officials who are joining us today. We have some district administrators who have joined us this afternoon. If you would stand at this time so we could recognize you. Back room. And if you're a current or a past staff member of Everett High School or Everett Public Schools, would you stand to be recognized? And now for the reason that we are here today, our alumni. There are so many of you, if you could just cheer for your decade so we can see how many are here. If you graduated between 2000 and 2009, our new graduates, could you cheer, please? So it wasn't too long ago that I was asking him to stop cheering while I was speaking. Graduates from the 1990s, how many of you are here today? Okay, how about the 80s? In the 70s? And the 60s? How about the 50s? And I would like the members of the class of any of the 1940s to stand so we can recognize you. We really appreciate you being out here today. Yeah. And if you graduated in the 30s, would you stand? All right. All right, how about the 20s? All right, so, okay, all right. I did also want to mention, many of you read about her in the paper, Louise Steiger Edmondson, class of 25. She's 103 years old and possibly our oldest living alumnus. She wasn't able to be here today, but we were so pleased that she was able to speak to Eric Stevick at the Herald and share her stories of Everett High. Finally, I'd like you to join me in thanking the members of the planning committee for this event. This dedicated group of staff and students and community members have been working for months to plan this event. If you could take a moment to note in the back of your program the committee members and the community organizations for their efforts, this day would really not have been possible without them. And I must apologize for leaving a couple of groups off of that important list. My thanks to Beth Watson East and the Be the Change Club for their help, and my thanks to the Everett Silver Tips who have generously donated tickets that will be prizes later on today. I hope that you will take some time to visit the different activities that we have planned for you, visit old friends and make new ones, view our archive materials in the library. There's also some old technology there that's quite interesting to look at. My secretary tells me I'll be using some of it next week. Blue and Gold members are here on the second floor. They have spirit gear and lots of information to support us. And the PTA is on the third floor. Sammy the Seagull is there if you want to get your picture taken with him. At this time, I would like to introduce our ASB president again, member of the class of 2010, Jorge Miguel Posadas Uceda. He's going to say just a few words about his experience here at Everett High School.
Hello. As my time here at Everett High has progressed, it has influenced and changed all the people around me as well as myself. I came here as a freshman with no intention to engage in school activities. And as I noticed the traditions that bloom here, I knew I wanted to be a part of this hallmark that has not only inspired so many to be successful, but also influenced every single one of its students to pursue a higher education. My time here at Everett has been anything but ordinary. I've gone through my most pivotal learning experiences, my absolute highs, and my lowest of lows. I've also developed strong leadership skills, being ASB president, football, and track captain. And I know that all these memories will stick with me for as long as I live, just as they stick with you. Everett High has been able to offer a fun, safe, and enjoyable environment for students, as well as all the resources needed to prepare students for life after high school. Being a part of this school and community has been one of the greatest experiences of my life, and I'm truly proud to say that I was and always will be a part of the School of Champions. Thank you.
And now a man who needs no introduction, but is going to get one, Larry O'Donnell. Larry O'Donnell is a consummate historian. He revels in learning everything about our school, district, and community. Mr. O'Donnell was born in Everett and graduated from Everett High School in 1955. He has been a teacher, principal, and district-level administrator at Everett Public Schools. He is also a dear friend, and I am so pleased that he is here with us today to share our history. Larry O'Donnell, class of '55.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. I know you can't see me, but you can see the screen, and that's where the attention's going to be. But how are you, seagulls? You having fun? And we'll try to keep that fun going with this little slideshow. But before we start, there's just a few people I'd like to acknowledge. And one is the person who really spearheaded this and put this together, and that's the Everett High School principal, Dr. Catherine Matthews. I also want to thank the Everett Herald and the Everett Tribune for the wonderful coverage that they've given as a lead up to this event. It's much, much appreciated. Those of you who know me know that I am technologically challenged. And a lot of you are too. But I want to thank my nephew, Jeff O'Donnell, who spent countless hours with me putting these images together, and I truly appreciate it. And I'd like to give Jeff a round of applause. And finally, and Dr. Matthews mentioned this, Dr. Sanford Wright, local neurosurgeon and a 1960 graduate of Everett High School, is recording this event, and this particular slideshow is a part of that. And he told me it would be on his website, which is everettneurologicalcenter.org. I hope I've got that right. And he also said that there are going to be DVDs of the presentation that will be available for people who would like to buy them. So how about a round of applause for Dr. Wright? Okay, I think we're ready to roll. Our story begins in 1890 when Tacoma entrepreneur Henry Hewitt, who's shown here, and a group of East Coast capitalists launched a plan to build a city of diversified industries on the Port Gardner Peninsula where the Snohomish River enters Puget Sound. The place would get its name from 15-year-old Everett Colby, the son of one of the Eastern financiers. Soon the word is out that John D. Rockefeller, America's richest man, is backing the project, and people swarmed to Everett. Within a few months, the site, which may have had 36 inhabitants in 1891, is a burgeoning community of 5,000 residents. Among the hundreds of new structures was this building on what would become Broadway. According to local legend, Henry Hewitt himself ordered that the second story be added when he learned it would be a schoolhouse. The building opened as a grammar school on December 14, 1891, when 26 students trudged through the mud for the first day of class. The teacher there to meet them was Emma Ewell, who recently had arrived from the Midwest. One of Everett's great pioneers, she was a superb educator who set high standards for students and left a lasting impact in the community. She served as teacher, principal, and eventually superintendent before leaving Everett to work in the Juneau, Alaska schools and then become a university professor in the Philippine Islands. Emma Ewell died in 1939 and is buried in Everett's Evergreen Cemetery. Her gravestone identifies her as Everett's first school principal. In the fall of 1892, with Emma Ewell leading the way, a high school program started in the Broadway building. In the spring of 1893, the first class graduated. It consisted of one member, Margaret Clark, who's shown here. A crowd estimated at 800 packed the Hart Opera House to watch the ceremonies. And I might just a little aside here, a few years ago, her son Clark Salisbury, who many of you knew, gave us that diploma, and it's secure in the vault of the Everett School District. Professor J.W. Shepard was appointed ranking principal, or essentially Everett's first school superintendent, in the fall of 1893 as the school program continued to expand. Shepard is the grandfather of current Everett attorney Mike Kite, whose children attended Everett High School. Academic courses were added. An activity program including drama, music, and athletics was developed for the high school. In 1893, a school newspaper, the Kodak, got started. It would be a few years before it was printed and published on a formal basis, and here we see a copy of Volume 1, Issue 1, the Kodak, September 1899. After its early boom, the city of Everett hit the skids when the effects of an 1893 financial panic swept the country. The high school program moved to several different locations, including the old Monroe School, as the city rode out the hard times. Everett's fortunes changed in 1900 when Jim Hill, the empire builder of the Great Northern Railway, stepped in to transform the city to a mill town. Within a few years, Everett's bayfront and riverfront were lined with plants that pumped out prodigious amounts of forest products. The shingle mills alone could produce over 6 million red cedar shingles a day. In 1901, Everett High School finally got a building of its own, this wooden structure at 25th and Oaks. A strong scholastic and activity program continued to grow. Track was among the many sports, and here we see pole vaulter Corey Duryee, a 1903 graduate, clearing the bar. Athletic events like this were held on a 30-plus acre fairgrounds, which stretched several blocks northeast from the current-day QFC store at Broadway and Everett Avenues. There were interscholastic sports for girls, too, and this 1906 EHS basketball team was a state power, losing just one game. The high school had no gymnasium, so the games were played at the YMCA. Starting around 1905, the high school issued a senior annual. Then in 1908, a new all-school yearbook called the Nasica first appeared. The Nasica noted the school colors were blue and gold. Over a century later, the Nasica and those school colors still identify Everett High School. But as that first Nasica rolled off the press, Everett High was bursting at the seams. In a city where the population surged from 8,000 in 1900 to nearly 25,000 in 1910, a new high school was needed. A $200,000 bond issue in 1908 financed the purchase of a block at 25th and Colby and the construction of a magnificent brick building on the site. Designed by James Stephen, who earlier was the architect for Everett's Washington School, the Beaux-Arts structure could house 600 students. On January 28, 1910, students moved to their new quarters, which could accommodate classes ranging from academic subjects to domestic science. On the second floor, in a space occupied today by the library, there was a spacious auditorium. This is a photo of that auditorium from the 1912 Nasica. Beneath the auditorium was a large gymnasium that provided space for music as well as physical activity. The new high school was a source of community pride and served as a venue for U.S. President William Howard Taft when he visited the city on October 9, 1911. Here we see the president surrounded by his very inconspicuous security guard. And the lady with the megaphone is Everett School District Physical Activities Director, May Long. Enoch Bagshaw, a fiery Welshman, arrived as Everett High's football coach in 1909, and over the next dozen years produced invincible teams. From 1911 to 1920, there was only one defeat by another high school. Brave Bellingham High School kept returning to play Everett despite being drubbed 174-0 by Bagshaw's 1913 team. The Everett teams were called simply the Champions, and that's the origin of the School of Champions label that still exists today. The Bagshaw era culminated with a 1919 team that tied with Scott High School of Toledo, Ohio in a mythical National High School Championship game, and a 1920 team that defeated East Technical High School of Cleveland, Ohio to claim the national title outright. Bagshaw left Everett in 1921 and became the head football coach at the University of Washington. Several of his Everett players followed, forming a nucleus that took the University of Washington to the Rose Bowl for the first time. An article in the 1921 Nesica, probably written by 1921 graduate Howard Breyer, who later would be a well-known author, noted that Everett High School football teams flourished when seagulls soared over the playing field. He referred to the seagull as the emblem of victory, and the name took hold. By the end of the 1920s, all Everett High teams were known as the Seagulls, and the name, of course, endures today. During the Bagshaw years, other changes were occurring at Everett High. In 1912, a vocational building was built across Colby at the north end of the block. This reflected an educational philosophy that some students could benefit from hands-on training for the world of work. For girls, it might mean a course in dressmaking, as shown here. For boys, it might mean carpentry training, such as building the stands for the new football stadium at 24th and Rainier, or building a house. The residence shown under construction here is one of many built by Everett High School vocational students over the years. In 1915, a commercial building was erected at the opposite end of the block from the vocational building. With much the same purpose as its predecessor, the courses taught here would prepare students for the business world. Students took subjects such as shorthand, bookkeeping, and typing. This 1920s view of the Everett High School campus shows the main building, vocational building, commercial building, and the Lincoln Grade School, which had been constructed in 1899 and sat on the site now occupied by the Civic Auditorium. A young science teacher by the name of Bert Vanderwilt joined the Everett High staff in 1922. Aside from World War II service, he would be there as a teacher, coach, and administrator until his retirement in 1960. He served as principal longer than anyone in the school's history. Active in the community, he might be the most well-known EHS staff member ever. Many outstanding teachers joined the faculty during this era, such as Valberg Ofstie, a sterling mathematics instructor who was here from 1919 to 1949. Her name lives on through a scholarship fund that has helped many graduating EHS seniors. Art Ramstead was a teacher and coach. From 1929 to 1966, a kind, compassionate individual, Rammy became one of the most beloved figures in Everett High School history. The 1930s were challenging, but Everett High emerged at the end of the decade with a striking new facility financed by local bonds and federal support. Opening in the 1939-40 school year, the new Civic Auditorium could hold nearly 2,200. And some of you, I'm sure, remember those hard wooden seats for that 2,200. It became the location for countless school and community events, including performances by the excellent Everett High School choirs. There were new music rooms, too, where staff members like Raymond Howell could continue to produce prize-winning bands and orchestras. At the east end, in the basement, the new building featured a state-of-the-art cafeteria. And above the cafeteria was a new gymnasium with seating for more than 1,400 spectators. With this and its glass backboards, the gym was the envy of other communities. It was inaugurated by an undefeated 1940 basketball team coached by Everett newcomer Jim Ennis. The Seagulls beat Oakville. The Seagulls beat Oakville. They edged them out for the state championship by the score of 64-19. They were acclaimed the finest high school basketball team in the state's history. And I know I saw one of the players from that team walk in. I knew Booty Gilbertson is sitting over here. Let's give Booty a hand. Three years later, Big Jack Nichols would star for the Everett High Cagers. He would become an All-American at the University of Washington and then star in the NBA. There were additions to the main building at this time, including a new library and a huge study hall. I'm sure that grads here today from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s recall that study hall and the people like Leona Preby Nesset, who ruled it. She ruled it with an even but iron hand. Another change at this time was the construction of a new Lincoln Elementary School to replace the one that had been demolished to make way for the auditorium. The new Lincoln was built on the site of the 1901 Everett High building at 25th and Oaks. In 1941, Lincoln became the first home for Everett Junior College. Over the years, structures were added until we had, in the 1950s, the campus shown here. In 1958, a new Everett Junior College campus was created in North Everett, and the facilities on this site were used for various school district programs, including Everett High School classes. In the early 1980s, all the structures were removed, and Everett High finally had a physical education athletic field of its own. The same year the auditorium gymnasium was completed, the United States was marching toward war. In the fall of 1940, the National Guard was activated. Here is the Everett unit in the 3000 block of Grand as they parade through the city on their way to Camp Murray and Fort Lewis. Many Everett High graduates, students, and staff, including Principal Bert Vanderwilt, were in the group. After Pearl Harbor in 1941, they saw some of the worst action in the Pacific Theater. As World War II drew to an end in 1945, Everett High School honored its more than 80 war dead with a memorial tablet in the Civic Auditorium entryway. Several decades later, more than 30 additional casualties were identified, and a new memorial listing the names of Everett High war dead since the Spanish-American conflict would be placed at the south end of the main building's top floor hallway. After the war, Everett rolled on with its mill town economy. Weyerhaeuser Timber Company was the city's largest employer. Everett was a true blue-collar town where the lunch buckets of the mill workers were much more common than fine china. New facilities began to appear in post-war Everett. In 1947, a stadium named in honor of the war veterans and capable of seating nearly 10,000 people was built on a site donated to the school district by the Everett Elks Lodge. In addition to providing a modern venue for athletics, Memorial Stadium was also a place for the EAHS Seagulls and the marching bands to strut their stuff. It also offered opportunities for the cheerleaders and song queens, and here we see a part of the group from the class of 1949. Although this shot was actually taken at the Everett Elks, the stadium was also the place to introduce the homecoming court to the public. And here we see 1962 Queen Kathy King and Princesses Karen Mullen, Kathy Tretwold, Ann Sievers, and Chris Smith. Another favored place that opened in the 1940s was the Gull's Nest in downtown Everett. The picture shown here is taken from the 1949 Nasica. Perhaps the staff member most associated with the Gull's Nest was Maury Thompson, who spent many a night there. This popular history teacher, himself a 1925 EHS graduate, was one of many alumni who returned to the school as staff members. Another was 1934 graduate Jack Bennett. An English teacher, coach, and advisor to the Golden Wings, he also was the early voice of the Memorial Stadium who announced the events there. And of all the returning alums, who could forget Marguerite Snavely? A 1932 graduate who re-arrived at Everett High in 1953. Dynamic, irrepressible, demanding, Snave coaxed the best out of her students, creating award-winning choral groups, stirring the Seagulls to even greater performances, and perhaps most memorably, directing those Broadway-quality musicals that packed the Civic Auditorium, like Annie Get Your Gun, whose cast is shown here. But not all the outstanding teachers had to be EHS alums. Ruth Skugel arrived at Everett High School in the 1950s from the land down under. She was at Everett High for about a decade before becoming one of the instructors that got Cascade High School underway. A marvelous teacher at both schools, she left an impact at EHS as a Nasica advisor and member of an English staff that produced nationally recognized writers like Bill Prochnow, Tom Teedy, and Tom Karras. And I know that Ruth is here today, so wave a hand, Ruth. Let's give her another round of applause. Joe Richer, back row far right, is pictured here. This is the 1961 golf team that won the school's 6th consecutive state championship under the able direction of Coach Bill Gowan. We're going to talk about Bill Dunn too. A student leader, Joe Richer excelled in both golf and basketball. He would return to Everett High as a teacher, counselor, and eventually head coach in both sports. After he died suddenly in 1998, the EHS basketball court was named Richer Court in his memory. Everett High School's enrollment had exceeded 2,000 when Cascade opened in 1961. For nearly 70 years, Everett had been a one high school town. Now there were the Seagulls and the Bruins, and that was an adjustment for the community. The start may have been a little traumatic, but the relationship developed into a friendly rivalry and an acceptance that the community could support two fine high schools. About the time Cascade opened, Everett High's main building was altered. The expansion of the library was welcome, but the addition to the front of the building was not received with the same enthusiasm. More about that later. Meanwhile, the Everett-Cascade rivalry may have been best personified by the rapport between Everett High School basketball coach Norm Lowry and his Cascade counterpart, Reg Scadeller. Reg is a 1946 Everett High graduate. Fierce competitors on the court, they were best of friends off court. Today it seems fitting that the Everett High Gymnasium is named for Norm Lowry and the one at Cascade for Reg Scadeller. Bob Henry arrived at Everett High School in 1955. and over the next 20-plus years, crafted a first-rate drama department that captured numerous state awards. Lois Foraker, a 1964 graduate, who later appeared on television and in movies, is one of the alums from the Henry era. Henry was thrilled in 1967 when the Everett School District bought the old Our Savior's Lutheran Church at 24th and Hoyt and converted it to Everett High's Little Theater. It provided a wonderful venue for his productions. By the mid-1960s, Everett was changing. The smokestacks disappeared as the city shifted from a mill town economy to one based on the aircraft industry. The completion of I-5, as illustrated by this early picture of the Eastmont interchange, connected the Puget Sound region in a new way. It prompted a commuter way of life and signaled a new era of growth. There were changes in the schools, too. Increased recognition of the students' diverse needs were reflected in both programs and facilities. More attention was given to the disabled student. Buildings were being designed and redesigned to make them accessible for everyone. As we reached the 1970s, the percentage of racial ethnic minority students increased. It's a trend that continues today with more than 30% of the current Everett High student body designated as minority. Changes that brought more opportunities for girls were exemplified by the development and expansion of an interscholastic girls athletic program. Eventually, there would be an equal number of sports for boys and girls. This brought into the coaching ranks such talented individuals as Dolores Sutherland. Suds became the first woman member of the Everett High School Coaches Hall of Fame. Undoubtedly, this program expansion was a factor in a 1980s facility expansion that saw a new gymnasium built on Rockefeller, the former gym and cafeteria converted to different uses, a tennis court established on the Clark Park block, and the former Everett Junior College site transferred into a physical education athletic field. And speaking of sports, there were times for EHS alum to still learn from their mentors. From left to right, we have Dwayne Lane, who with his wife Rosemary and their family have done so much for the youth of this community. Next to him, Dick Hansen, one of two Everett High grads to return as principal. His classmate Lee Van Winkle was the other. And on the far right, Ernie Dyer, who became a teacher, coach, EHS vice principal, and eventually athletic director. And here they are consulting with the guy who liked to call him the old coach, a guy that offered guidance to two generations of Everett youth, the one and only Jim Ennis. As we entered the 1980s, even more change. Could anyone have predicted how this little apparatus called the computer would develop and alter our lives? There was a need for new science facilities in the 1980s, and in 1989, a new science building was constructed northeast of the main building. Now there would be modern facilities for a fine science staff that would include instructors like Cynthia McIntyre, who was selected as the Washington State Science Teacher of the Year in 2006. And she was just one of a continuation of top-flight teachers. People like English instructor Betty Honeyman. She retired, allegedly, but continued to come back and teach at Everett High School until she was in her 80s. Or Gary Evans, the Pied Piper musician. He recruited students by the hundreds to his marvelous band program. Everett Memorial Stadium continued to receive upgrades, including a field house named in honor of Jim Ennis. And 4 Everett High alumni pose here in front of that field house plaque. Ernie Dyer on the left, Jim Ennis's son Terry, who followed in his dad's footsteps as a coach, teacher, athletic director, and was selected by the Seattle Times as the greatest high school football coach in the state's history. Bill Dunn played for Bill played for and coached with Jim and was the director of construction for the field house. And next to Bill, Ross Rettenmeyer, who along with his wife Judy has been a leader of the Blue and Gold Club, which does so much to help Everett High School youngsters. By the 1990s, Boeing had expanded and was still Everett's major employer, and the Navy had made its appearance known. Jackson High School opened in the 1990s as Everett's third comprehensive high school. The continuing growth prompted a realization that if Everett High School was still servicing the entire Everett and Mukilteo school districts as it did 50 years ago, the school population would now be over 10,000 students. By the early 1990s, all the buildings on the Everett High School campus, except the main building, had been constructed or remodeled within the previous dozen years. Now it was time to address the needs of the crown jewel. The purpose was twofold: create a first-rate, state-of-the-art educational facility, and two, restore the building to its original elegance. School district officials worked with a gifted design team from Dyckman Architects and a dedicated Kirtley & Co. construction company, which was owned and managed by two Everett High School graduates, Ray Kirtley and Gordon Cole. After more of a year of construction, I told you there'd be more on that. The big day occurred on June 21st, 1995, when the annex, and that's the nicest name it was ever called, finally was crunched down and the spectacularly revived main building was revealed. The place that had turned dingy and gray was once again the pride of the community. An aerial view after the project showed a campus that covered 4 city blocks and parts of 2 others. In the early part of the 21st century, the field in the foreground would receive an artificial surface and other updates to make it usable year-round. And the Little Theater would get a major revamp, which many of you saw today if you visited that facility. So all of this leaves us with a first-rate campus for Everett High School students. There's a devoted staff to provide the education for those students. And folks, that's a kind of a whirlwind trip through 117 years of Everett High history. But before we wind this up, let's take a look at a few of the many, many Everett High School alumni. We begin with Leroy Vernon, an 1894 graduate who was instrumental in starting the Kodak. Working later for the Chicago Daily News, he developed a reputation as one of the nation's leading political reporters. Close to President William Howard Taft, he may have played some role in Taft's 1911 visit to Everett. 1916 graduate Gertrude Jackson returned to teach at Everett Garfield School for 43 years. She was the older sister of Senator Henry M. Jackson, who in 1973 established a charitable trust in her memory. To date, that fund has provided more than $1 million in aid to needy and Everett and Mukilteo students. Mon Walgren attended Everett High School about the same time as Gertrude Jackson. Later, he would become perhaps the only person in Washington State history to be a U.S. congressman, U.S. senator, and governor of the state. Interestingly, we have yet to find evidence that he actually graduated from high school. Max Miller, shown here with his mother, is a 1919 graduate who wrote 26 books, the most famous being I Cover the Waterfront, which was made into a motion picture. Several of his books include tales from his Everett childhood, giving us a fascinating glimpse of early Milltown Everett. Another Miller from the class of 1919, Seaton, also became a writer and won an Academy Award for his work on Here Comes Mr. Jordan. To the best of my knowledge, the two Millers are not related. Ellen Repp, class of 1920, achieved international fame as a singer and performer, but before that, she was a teacher at Everett South Junior High School. One of her pupils was a ninth grader named Henry M. Jackson. He always credited her for inspiring him to pursue a career in governmental service. A star on Bagshaw's football teams, George Wilson, a 1922 alumnus, followed Bagshaw to the University of Washington. He was an All-American running back at the university and later led the Providence Steamrollers to the 1928 National Football League Championship. He is in the College Football Hall of Fame, the Rose Bowl Hall of Fame, and was voted the greatest Husky football player of the first half century of Husky football. Margaret Billings, class of 1928, she's in the upper right here, entered the military as an Army nurse in 1942, shortly after Pearl Harbor. She was killed in 1945 when a kamikaze plane hit the hospital ship on which she was serving. She is believed to be Snohomish County's only woman military casualty of World War II. 1929 graduate Jean Metz, stage name was Jean Merrill, was a singer with the Metropolitan Opera Company in the 1930s and 40s. To the delight of Everettites, she would return here on occasion to perform. It was a proud moment for Everett when 1930 graduate Nancy Coleman's name appeared on the Everett Theater's marquee for the 1942 film King's Row. As stage and screen actress for several years, she got marquee billing for her role. Another star of the movie did not, a fellow by the name of Ronald Reagan. Everett High's most famous graduate is Henry M. Scoop Jackson, class of 1930. U.S. Congressman for 12 years and U.S. Senator for 31 years before his untimely death in 1983. He also made a credible bid for the U.S. presidency in 1972 and 1976. Shown here, front center, with her other EHS band members, 1940 graduate Norma Kelly Neely was considered America's top trumpet player from 1949 to 1952. And of course, many of you remember that she and her husband Dusty operated Carousel Music in downtown Everett for many years. With his accordion, and his Scandinavian corn, 1944 graduate Stan Borson became a Pacific Northwest television icon. A whole generation, many of them here today, can still recite the words to Xeris Dacus Muchus Crocus. Marge Haveneck, class of 1948, won several amateur ice skating titles and then joined the famous Shipstead and Johnson Ice Volleys. Shown here, gazing from the window of his studio, Mike Jordan. Class of 1952, he followed his mother in teaching dance to hundreds, if not thousands, of Everett children. He's memorialized with a bronze statue in front of Everett's Performing Arts Center, and there's rarely a day that there isn't a flower in his lapel from one of his countless admirers. Bill Balcom, class of 1955, is a gifted pianist and composer who has earned many awards, including a Pulitzer Prize in 1988 and a National Medal of Arts Award from President Bush in 2006. Pictured with him in this high school era photo is Patsy Sand, a talented 1958 graduate who, like Balcom, earned a doctorate in her field. 1957 graduate Ed Hansen has had success in law, business, governmental service, and he's also quite a bowler. He served 3 terms as Everett's mayor and later headed up the Snohomish County PUD. The conference center at Everett Comcast Arena is named for him. Chuck Close, class of 1958, is an internationally known artist. He's done groundbreaking work in the photorealist portrait movement. He is identified by Arts News as one of the 50 most influential individuals in the art world. 1963 graduate Bob Gaston was, that's the class of 63 you're hearing. Gaston was the managing editor when the staff of the Longview Daily News won a Pulitzer Prize for its reporting of the 1980 Mount St. Helens eruption. And we all recognize this trio: Mike Price, 1964, Dennis Erickson, 1965, and Jim Lambright, 1960. Football coaches supreme who have mentored top-level programs. And today we could add the name of Dave Christensen, class of 1979, head football coach at the University of Wyoming. Sharon Walker Boye, class of 1975, was a 4-time state high school champion in the long jump. She qualified for the 1976 Olympic team and, as of this date, still holds, some 35 years later, the state high school long jump record of 21 feet 3 inches. In this picture from a 1993 book on Everett's history, we see the Mai family, one of those families who escaped from Vietnam in 1975 and came to Everett. All 5 of the Mai children attended Everett High School and all graduated with honors. Ron Gibson. He's pictured here in front of the Rose Bowl during his UW football days, was an outstanding football player and track man at Everett High. Like so many EHS alum, this 1976 graduate has remained in the community and taken an active role. Currently, he's on the Everett City Council. Joe Metzger-Levine. Class of 1977, had an outstanding EHS basketball career and then became an NAIA All-American at Western Washington University. Rated one of the top 10 women basketball players in state history in 2008, she was named by Western as their best female athlete of the 20th century. She returned to Everett High School as a teacher and coach and is still on the staff today. Her family, which is rooted in Everett history, created a scholarship for deserving Everett High School graduates. 1978 graduate Chuck Nelson. An excellent scholar and athlete at Everett High, he developed into an All-American place kicker for the University of Washington and followed that with a career in the National Football League. Today, he's a businessman and an announcer for UW football games. Among his many contributions to Everett, he created a scholarship fund for Everett High School students. Generally considered the best all-around athlete in Everett High School's history, 1983 graduate Chris Chandler starred for the University of Washington football team and then quarterbacked the Atlanta Falcons to the 1999 Super Bowl. Today he lives in Southern California. 1996 graduate Otto Olson won 3 state wrestling titles while at Everett High. And then became an All-American wrestler at the University of Michigan. Today he teaches and coaches in the Puget Sound area. From a candidate base of more than 4 million youngsters, Liberty Franklin was named the National Youth of the Year in 1998 by the Boys and Girls Club of America. This 1999 graduate just completed the University of Washington Dental School and is now in her first year of practice. A really amazing young lady. Janelle Mora, the 2008 graduate shown here, was selected a Gates Millennium Scholar. This coveted award, earned by students for their talent and hard work, provides all educational expenses from high school graduation to a doctoral degree. Janelle was the second EHS student to earn the Gates Award in a 2-year period. Philip Bowie, class of 2007, is the other. Both are attending college now, and I'm sure we're going to hear much from this pair in the future. I'd like to conclude this afternoon by sharing with you a little walk I took through Everett High School a couple of weeks ago. I sauntered through the main building and finally wandered into the gym where the sign reminded me that I was indeed in the School of Champions and the home of the Seagulls. A glimpse of this photo in the gymnasium confirmed that champions are still coming out of Everett High School. Then I made my way to Colby and took this shot. I thought about the tens of thousands who have trod those hallways and the tens of thousands who will in the future. In fact, I mused, there most certainly will be a party in 2110 to celebrate the main building's 200th birthday. Then I realized that while we gather today in recognition of a beautiful building's century of existence, we are in a larger sense paying homage to an institution that is an integral part of this community. Most of us who attended here didn't win national honors, but we did get a solid education from a dedicated staff. We were given the tools and in many cases the inspiration to lead productive lives. We worked hard, we had fun. We made friendships at Everett High that still last today. In short, we were blessed to have attended Everett High School. And finally, I smiled as I remembered the oft-quoted words of Everett High School icon Bill Dunn, "Once a seagull, always a seagull."
We have a little bit more in our program, so if you'd stick around. Thank you, Larry. It's always amazing to see 100 years go by on the screen in 30 minutes. Great job. At this time, I'd like to invite up one of the members of our committee, Mr. Bruce Overstreet. And I should know his class, but I know he's Generation 3 and his kids are 4. He's going to give out a couple of prizes before we do our last activities.
Well, I want to thank Larry for that special and just touching presentation. This is really daunting, being up in front of so many people, and many people I've admired over the years. So thank you for coming. It's been a special treat. And Dr. Matthews, thank you for hosting this. It's been a lot of hours. It's been a great committee. She's done a great job. I think we need to give her a hand for a great job. Obviously, this is a special place, and there are a lot of people in the community helping out. The Silvertips have donated tickets to families the family that has the most people attending today. So we know of one family that has 8. If your family has more than 8, see us afterwards, and we'll give you a block of tickets to the Silvertips game coming up. Now, the other thing that's really daunting is figuring out which class has the most in attendance. And I was in the class of 50s room quite a bit, and wow, that was an overflow crowd. So we are still trying to figure out which class has the most in attendance. We will be announcing that shortly, and we have another chance for you guys to get together and celebrate a block of Silvertip tickets later on. So listen up, we'll do that shortly. The two that we really want to highlight today are the person who came the furthest and the oldest alumni here. So we're going to do this real quickly. If you came from out of state, if you could stand up right now, we're going to figure out who came the farthest today. Stand up if you came from out of state. Don't be shy. Come on, we're all friends here. Do we have anyone out of state? Stand up. Okay, we're working our way out. 2 states away. 2 states away. We see a couple people. 3 states away. Still standing? Still standing. 3 states? Anyone 3 states? Okay. Sir, where are you from? Or is that, ma'am, right up there? I'm having a hard time seeing with the lights so bright. Where are you from, ma'am? California. There you go. You see me afterwards, a prize donated by Blue and Gold. And if it doesn't fit, you can take it back and get a different size. The other one, the coveted grand prize, is the oldest alum. And I understand we have someone from the 1920s. So how many 1920s graduates do we have here? We have, we had a gentleman from the class of 1922, if I recall correctly. Is he still here? We're being quiet again. Class of 1922? I feel like I'm auctioning off a coveted item here. Class of 1923 still here. Oh, I'll tell you what, if you're in the 20s, see me afterwards and we will get you this prize. We need to pick this thing up. So thank you, class of 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and even the 2000 group. It's been a special afternoon, and I give it back over to Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Overstreet. All right, so at this time I'm going to ask our current students to come on up on stage with me. Guys, great, all right. So Everett High School continues to produce fiercely loyal graduates. And if you have attended a sporting event any time in the recent past or one of our assemblies, you know that our preferred celebratory song, as it has always been, is our alma mater. So at this time, our current students are going to lead you in the Everett High School alma mater. Oh, here comes Sammy Siegel even. All right. All right, come on. Sammy, you do the hand measure. All right, Sammy can't sing, but he's going to be here in spirit. All right, take it away.
You guys ready? 1, wait, stand up. Thank you. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Evie.
I hope today has been a memorable day for you. There's still lots of time for you to visit. Certainly join us in the cafeteria for refreshments. And tonight, as you're at home relaxing, watching Turner Movie Classics, you will notice that the host is Robert Osborne, class of 1950, and our commencement speaker. Awesome day, you guys. Thanks for being here.